Hello.
Hi, Jackie.
How are you? So welcome to our, is it 13th or 12th? 12th Think Big. There you go. Hannah has the numbering right. From our last meeting, just as a recap, we dove into a couple of outstanding items around the release pages use case and how we're trying to solve this idea of distributing binaries with the releases page. This topic, we're going to uncover a little bit more information around the user story of managing deployments at scale across multiple projects. So a couple of issues that came up during our analyst review of continuous delivery and release automation is this idea of managing deployments at scale. So with thousands of environments over hundreds of different target production environments. And today, GitLab, if you're not using a deploy board with multiple projects, can get a little unwieldy. So for people who are using traditional or legacy style deployments, release management isn't particularly friendly to check the health of that. It's not particularly helpful if people are looking to approve a global release. Everything is very much about per merge request, per pipeline, per environment. So giving our personas like release managers and development team leads that are creating builds and creating production releases, the tools to manage at scale is really important. So some of the things that Hyana and I are working on in validation cycles are like DORA 4 metrics, which are the 4 metrics that are industry standard for deployment tracking, but also the CI/CD director dashboard, which is about confronting ZBA Labs's value stream metrics. But there's other kinds of details that we could iteratively consider adding to GitLab to make this journey a little bit more accessible for our people. So just wanted to kind of set the context of what we're trying to accomplish, which is tracking deployments at scale in GitLab, and let you all sort of talk through what you think would be a good way to solve that problem. We're thinking big, so no limits here. Let's just talk about it.
I have a question at the outset. When we say deployments at scale, I saw the screenshot in the document. And so are we talking about 10s, 50s, like just to kind of get an idea of what the dashboard might look like? And, you know, things like scrolling and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a super question. So my initial gut reaction is as big as you can imagine. But our
Awesome.
most likely target are people who are trying to manage hundreds of production environments. So if we think about the largest companies that have a production microservice environment that then feeds into a customer-facing experience in a different kind of like trajectory, they may have hundreds of production protected level environments.
And might we also consider on this board non-production environments, like, you know, UAT or whatever, you know, other environments that are being used?
We should
that are still important. Yeah.
Consider filtering. So I would say as an MVC, we may only display production environments because a release manager is going to potentially be focused just on the end state and looking at the health of my current, but then future iterations could be being able to include other lower level environments.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this is such an awesome feature. I think it's really going to shoot us out of the ballpark. And so the other thing I guess I was thinking about is, you know, we have all this instrumentation and logging and, you know, Prometheus and all this stuff. And maybe we, not, you know, after the initial MVC might consider, you know, how can we link from that environment, you know, on the dashboard to get all this other instrumentation that we're already doing easily, which of course takes us outside of release management as a group, right?
I love that you brought that up. There's this feature that Ori is working on right now calling post-deployment monitoring. So I just copy pasted from a weird link, sorry. So this feature that she's working on is about attaching alerts from monitoring inside of the environments page. So she's kind of designed this independently of what we're doing. So it'll give us an opportunity to kind of look back and think about how do we extend this. It's almost like a myopic focus on deploy boards alerting and apply it more toward the new environment dashboard. But you're absolutely right. There is an opportunity to create a beautiful loop between release and monitor in a more thoughtful way. And I don't know if you all have noticed, but Sid created this video about the Atlassian integration with OpsGenie. There might be an opportunity for us to create like a webhook on deployments into OpsGenie and have that be an integration path of release to Atlassian.
Awesome. Wow. And you know, we already have a lot of these pieces in place, right? I mean, we have monitoring, we have tracing. You know, we've now got Elasticsearch as a managed component, and you can see down the track that, you know, we're now almost in a space where we're competing with something like Datadog, or, you know, we might be able to compete with something like that as part of the full stack, which would be, I mean, that's a lot further down the track, obviously, but we do have the pieces already in place. We just kind of don't have a holistic view, and maybe this dashboard is a place for that.
Oh, you're reading my mind. I love whenever I hear these affirming words of like the things I'm thinking, and whenever you say it, because it just shows that like, yes, this is a need that we should solve. Because you're totally right. Like being able to almost do like a Datadog Lite that's cheap. Is what the market needs, because everyone is like, oh, Datadog is so expensive. My 6 teammates are driving hundreds of thousands of consumption dollars, because they are, which is great for the investors of Datadog and great for the growth of Datadog, but not super great for people who want to have one license to manage their DevOps lifecycle and to be cost effective. So this is a really great opportunity for us to capture that missing piece in the market, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, and especially when we've already got customers on, you know, the rest of the life cycle. And so, speaking of cost, do we have an idea what tier this would be?
So, if we look at alerts, I think that that's catering to the premium and ultimate use case. And then, of course, if we think about production environments, most of our customers are going to try to use production with protected environments, because that way they can at least restrict who can deploy to it. But if we add that reporter plus approval to deploy permission set, that makes this a little bit more accessible to production environments, not necessarily having to be protected, because it could just be the deployer only has permissions to that particular environment. So I could see this being in something in Starter. I don't know if our core users as an individual developer would benefit from this feature, because when I think about an individual developer hacking away, they're not having to reconcile the same challenges.
This is the big shop, which are probably already on some level of premium anyway.
Right. So I'm thinking like, where are the buyers for this, and if it would be wasted in core. We could always downgrade it anyways, but I think conservatively, this is something that would be a premium feature or a starter feature.
Awesome. And just also thinking, just, you know, the dashboard concept. And so, again, maybe not, or probably not in the first MVC, but would we also consider, okay, you know, pausing that environment, or, you know, restarting that, you know, having buttons to do things like that, restart the environment, or, you know, redeploy it, or, you know, things like that you would normally maybe initiate through a pipeline, but, you know, you could also perhaps get to from the dashboard?
Yes. So I have this issue about making rollbacks more discoverable. And this would be one opportunity for us to look at like a release bundle and make a rollback to the latest version tag, which contains a series of commits, not just that single commit. That's the problem with our views right now. All of them are like single line commits. They're not about like redeploying a whole package, right? So you're absolutely right.
And that's something that Heroku, when I first used that feature in Heroku, I was floored. This was so easy and it works so well, and I've used it many times, right? You just go, bang, take me back. And aside from migrations can be a bit tricky, but everything else, it can just roll back instantly, which is pretty incredible, actually. It's a great production feature.
That's super interesting to hear about your Heroku experience. It's something that I'm noticing when we look at like Heroku and where they play. They very much are in like the core feature set, you know, like customers or individual developers. So empowering individual developers, that might mean like rollbacks will definitely be something that we want to put in core so that we can compete head to head with Heroku for the individual developer, and then land and expand with things like version dependencies and binary distribution and access, guest access to public releases, for example. Like if we wanted to create an attractive upgrade path for the individual contributor.
Yeah, because the Heroku upgrade path is actually the opposite, right? Like you start off free and pretty affordable, but if you're running anything at scale, it becomes ridiculous, you know, quite quickly.
I have a different question about environments. Is it possible to pin them to a location? So basically using geolocation. And we could maybe, like when you have a distributed view on your environments, use a geographical map just to have maybe a heat map on a world map. I often see that in the monitoring space, that people just want to see that based on the location on the data center on the rollout. And maybe we could just use that as a dashboard or dashlet for the view then.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I am interested in if their Geo is self-managed mostly. So when we look at Geo's feature set, they don't offer things for GitLab.com. So I'm wondering how we would accomplish that for the GitLab.com use case.
I think Geo is actually for the high availability of GitLab itself. I don't know if that directly applies to environments, or if we can just use that. My thinking is basically to have since we're talking about larger systems and larger customer systems, to have a global map so that you maybe add the location to an environment as a variable or a setting, maybe even as a CI extension, and then the map automatically renders.
I think that's go ahead.
Sorry. There might be two ways to do that. One is to let the customers, you know, as you're saying, have some type of annotation where they basically say this is, you know, New York or something. And so that would be maybe more a responsibility, you know, line of responsibility. Because if it's on, you know, GCP or something, then I guess we could also follow what data center it is in AWS or GCP. But unless the customer has multiple data centers, then there'll only be one sector on the map, right? But there could be customers that have multiple, or they could be running their own. So I think we might want to have a combination of having it predefined from whatever cloud provider can tell us, as well as having some way where the customer can annotate it themselves.
Yeah, I think MVC would probably be specified, you know, add an environment attribute to specify location of target environment. And then we can kind of look at if there's rules that we can look at the URLs specified. So for example, if it does have like a region indicated in it, I will need to validate if this is something that would move the needle for people who are monitoring in GitLab today or not. So for example, if location isn't as relevant because they're leaving GitLab to go to AWS or GCP to look at the region, then that's a great conversion opportunity to keep people in GitLab, right? So it'll incentivize them because we're offering this feature in GitLab. But if people are not leveraging GitLab to even deploy to multiple regions, then that might be a feature that could not make a lot, right?
I think from a technical standpoint, just thinking how we would do it, it probably wouldn't be that complicated, right? We just have a map, and then we'd somehow label the environments, whether it's done by the data center or some other way, and then we just plot them on the map, and it would look pretty, it would have the bells and whistles in terms of showing it to customers and stuff. I definitely take your point, Jackie. Like, it would only be super large customers that would actually consider using something like this. But for those, for those customers, it could be worth talking to them actually and seeing what they think about it.
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 in my mind already that will be worth talking about this with. So for example, the ones who want to manage environments at scale to begin with, the filtering that they've immediately talked about are just by target URL, by stage, and by project. So those were like the top 3 things that they've indicated as wanting. If I was to suggest region, that might be something that they would all jump at, right? But it might be like a delight feature. So we may prioritize, project filtering over location, mainly because today I think we would need a user to specify the region or location of that environment. And any time where you add a step or add a click or add an action on the user, adoption decreases. So we want to make things as seamless or as auto-detected as possible in GitLab to make that usable. But I agree, this will be something that I've already added to my agendas for my calls to speak with customers that I'll bring up. Good idea, Michael. Look at you.
Just to add 5 cents here, I remember we had a similar investigation when I was at Xebia Labs, and that was a highly demoable, likable thing. So I agree with you, Jackie. I remember it wasn't like the first need, but it would definitely create like a wow effect during the demo when we would add the geo like topology view. That what we called it, I think. So that sounds interesting.
I love it. When I think about the audience for that, it really is like the monitoring team, the system admins, and then the buyers that want to show their distribution powerhouse. Yeah. When I think about the usability of the release manager, they're going to care more about like a calendar view or toggling between calendar view with stage view, like how many environments are in my dev test versus production. So like that different resource view could all be in one plane, and then they're different tabs. Like Hyan and I kind of talked about this, like being able to toggle between topography and calendar and stage views would be very compelling for the release manager, but also the buyer and the system admin. We'd be able to cater to all these users in one view.
Definitely. And actually, I had a question here also, and pardon me if that's like a little bit of a weird question, but let me ask that. I remember when I was like a part of Xebia Labs, we've been talking about 2 different types of like 2 different ways of how organizations set up their environment. So of course, like there is this more like modern type of organizations who use cloud environments that are like automatically being spinned up and down based on the needs. But there was also those types of organizations who are more like a less more like a legacy, if you want to call that, who've been using more of this like I think on-prem environments, like they would manage manually something, and they would probably have like this old way of like old persona, kind of like environment manager or something like that, helping to like take care of those like environments who usually are in limited amount comparing to like, if you have the possibility to split those across cloud. Are we talking about this split here, or we are like looking more into the modern way of doing these things?
So I think managing environments at scale could cater to any sort of cloud target. But if we're to consider like any VM or server or on-prem device, that could be even larger at scale. So when we think about a person that has a SaaS offering and they have 1,000 customers, each with their own instance, they would need to track the version of their SaaS software solution or their solution deployed to that on-prem instance of the customer. More like single tenant applications consuming SaaS software, for example. That could be thousands and thousands of different environments that you would be monitoring as a part of your deployment chain. I have a really good example of this. When I was a product manager at a previous company, we delivered a substitute teacher management system, and it was a part of Frontline was our biggest competitor. Miss Teacher over there, Lori.
Hey, I had the one that they called you. I had the call, and you had to push the phone
the
number.
IVR system. That's exactly what it was. So we had over 2,000 customers, K-12 school districts using this solution, and they each had their own set of servers and duplication servers. So our instances were like 3 or 4 different EC2 containers, as well as servers to create backups to these customer hosted platforms. But we were deploying our solution onto these servers, and we were monitoring each individual, container as well as server that a customer had. So that was a hybrid deployment model. Yeah. And I think that this view, we would want customers to be able to see, I have K-12 District 1 server green, but my EC2 instance has spun down because we're not collecting something. We need to be able to correct my EC2 container to make sure that we have an adequate backup for that on-prem server, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm also asking about that because I remember when we would be talking to like more like the legacy type of organizations, for that environment manager persona, they would literally need a calendar to see, okay, like I have that physical environment busy until that time, and then we can clean it up and use it for something else. So there would be a lot of questions around like the availability resolution type of tasks. Whether I think if you're managing that on cloud, it's kind of like easier. If you need more, you just spin up more or spin down, like just based on how much capacity you pay for. So that I remember just that was the biggest like difference for us when we've been talking to the different sets of personas. That the manual management would need much more clear way, like to see, okay, what do I have today available? Because it's almost, they would be like often working with some like limited capacity, I would call it.
That is really that's what I have. A couple of different screenshots in our agenda. One of them is a release calendar from Plutora, which highlights like all the different target environments and their status. And then we also have Electric Cloud's view, which shows you the stage and the different various attributes of that, whether it's like certain metrics or certain resources that you would want to pull in. I could see that all of these would be relevant for both multi-cloud, but also server on-prem deployments.
Yeah. And my actually second question, I don't know if you people are discussing this in these things big, but I'm curious, like, what are the ways we have today in GitLab to help people manage their environments? Like, I know that we have the environment list view almost. We have that alert page that gives you warnings. Are there any other places, like, I don't know, any dashboards or anything? Like, it sounds like we have this information scattered over all of the places. Like, do we see anything that we specifically want to keep doing? Do we need to like add specifically something? Like curious if you want to go that way to discuss what we have today and what's missing.
So I can tell you that we have an environments dashboard that is super restrictive. We have 7 projects and 3 environments per project. So it allows you to see a very limited subset of cross group though. So that's nice. Like all of your projects within a group can be pulled on here if you have, 7 projects with only 3 environments per, but that doesn't give you like the global view of if you're running a 100 target deployment perspective. But this is what people aren't using today, but they would like to use if it supported more environments. And then of course we have the environment list view inside of the operations panel that if you have it running, you can see all of your environments and their relevant images. And if you
so in a way we would restructure what's in this already and then add things like like the Prometheus or Jaeger tracing, all the performance monitoring, all these other things that we already have that are just kind of like all over the place.
So what I would love to see is we take this environments dashboard and we add a stagnant, like as an MVC, a stagnant like heat map of every single environment that you have. And each little square is a different color and a different environment. And it shows just a snapshot of the health. And then below you have all of these options and you have like a filter that tells you what you can select, whether it's you want to select specific projects, specific labels, specific statuses to triage in one view. And then I'd also like to see multiple ways to toggle between the different views. Like maybe I want to see this exact same heat map information on a calendar. Like, are there things in a deploy freeze right now? Are there things that have an alert tied to them or have a bug or an S1P1 on it? Like there's ways to tie issues back into that second view. And then the third view could be like topography and, like that kind of perspective. But it would be great to expand this environments view iteratively, but have more connection to other places in our platform. Like here, we can easily click into the pipeline view and we can easily go into this particular job and see the logs from that view, which is super useful. But we can't tie back to, that project or the alert system. So being able to connect that, like you were saying, would be very useful for our customers.
So Jackie, in this heat map, so then we've got these little squares and they're green or red or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you see something red and then you click on it and you get like a larger view, right? Or like an expanded view of what we just saw maybe. Okay.
I could see that. Yeah. My initial thought was just giving people something that gives them an overview status and having no interactions with it and making people scroll down to interact with a particular environment. Is the benefit of the heat map, and even if it's very limited initially, is that you get your health, right off the bat. But I could see a lot of value of like drilling in. You're absolutely right.
No, but you're also right. I mean, it's actually that is the MVC, right? The MVC is okay. Here's the map, and if customers want more, then we'll hear from them, right? That that. By the way, wouldn't it be great if we could click on this square or whatever, right?
And then we're not bloating our MVC either with a bunch of unnecessary actions. Like I would rather give something very lean and super that hits the point directly, and then get feedback on what people are wanting to actually do with it.
Perfect.
And I always worry when Hailan is quiet in these meetings because it means that like I'm I'm like picking the GitLab component UIs that are going to require like a whole new lexicon and redo in pajamas, and then it's going to take like a year to deploy.
No, I'm quiet because I'm just absorbing all the information. And I was actually thinking about like, that was a great question from Nadia of what are the ways for us to find the information, and everything is all scattered. And every time I look back at this environment dashboard, and I know that it lives like in a higher level, right? It doesn't belong to a project or to a group, anything like that. I wonder, the question is not like how do we make the connection, but talking about the user flow. And when we talk about the CI/CD, the group level dashboard, if we would still like to make that separation, you know, for group level administration and visualization of this information of the metrics versus the environments dashboard. So it's not really a question.
So, well, maybe it's like we redo the environments dashboard to be a CI/CD dashboard, and a click-through is an environments view, and then another nested click-through is the different environment ways to view environments. That could be,
yeah, that's interesting because I think you guys mentioned earlier Heroku, right? And I was looking at their UI, and they also have something similar, like a dashboard. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's here. It's actually on their homepage. And I find it very interesting, this concept that they have of, let me share my screen. I'm not super familiar with the product, so if I'm being, if I'm not.
Yeah, they actually, you really hit the nail on the head earlier, Jackie, because Heroku is so polished, and it's actually an awesome product, I've got to say, but it really is for the small developer team or single developer.
Yeah, and I was looking at like how they organize their hierarchy. I never used the product, so I'm not super familiar with it. But like this concept of, you know, kind of drilling into the projects, the groups, and then seeing dramatics aggregated, but also looking at a higher level, which is like what you're saying, the big dashboard. So I'm just consuming the information and trying to link this with how it would look in the user flow. So it's
that's why you're my other half, Ayana. That's why we have this like release management marriage. You're thinking about the user flow, and I'm like, let's just build cool stuff. I love it. Thank you.
Because something else they have, Hyana, is you know, you have a project, and then they have multiple stages, and they call them a pipeline. It's not a CI. They have actually introduced a CI, but that's relatively new, and it's a bit. But they have this concept of pipeline, which represents your development environments, right? So you have like a staging environment and maybe a UAT, and then you have finally a production, you know, and that's where this button is to do the rollback. So, you know, everything's great in UAT, and I've actually used this feature before. You roll out to production, suddenly, you know, all the alerts are going, and you don't know why. You just go bang rollback, and you know, they are awesome features.
That simplicity, that usability, and nimbleness is really what we need to give to these super complex and at scale organizations. So I love that we keep talking about like Heroku and how easy it is. Like, we need to recreate that easiness for enterprises, because there isn't a good solution in the market today. Like Spinnaker is super painful to use. Zebia Labs, you have to do a bunch of setup, and it's hard to set up. I had to use a Raspberry Pi to install my Zebia Labs instance because it wouldn't set up on my Mac. It was ridiculous. So I think that if we can do this in GitLab.com, our biggest customers that are currently on GitLab.com would drop 3 or 4 other solutions for this. We'd get huge existing customer seat expansion, not to mention the ease of scalability here. Like, a prospect would be floored to know that they can come in here and see the visibility that Jenkins gave them before, and be able to plan and meet the visibility and transparency for the other personas. What could be really helpful.
Yeah, because one thing that GitLab does really well is it insulates users. I mean, we have, you know, Kubernetes, we interact directly with Google Cloud, and all that. You're basically insulated from that stuff because it's so complex, and, you know, And so if we could add, even as you're saying, Jackie, even another layer of simplicity over the top, along with some awesome design, because I think that is something that Heroku has right that, for example, AWS does not have right, which is design. It just, you know, and I think that does make a difference. You know, I think we're in the middle of those two things. You know, we're certainly superior to something like AWS, but you know, I think some of the other products are so polished and they just look so incredible. You know, you just want to look at the dashboard because it just looks so beautiful. That's what we're going to have.
Completely agree with that. That's awesome. And I can't tell you, I've been on 6 calls or so about customers who have showed me their Zebia Labs value stream POC. And I'm like, dang, you all, like the POC is not going to get you like where you need to be. But once they see that we're looking at building the CI/CD dashboard, like have it be natively just supported in their GitLab infrastructure, they automatically like just stop talking about Zebia Labs. So like giving them compelling metrics that just capture what their team is doing is a gap that we need to solve, and we need to solve it quickly because the urgency in the market is coming up because Zebia knows that we're a threat to their market. And as a result, like any of these deals that we're going head to head against, I've seen so many copy pastes from community forum, people complaining about how they can't manage things at scale, copy pasting comments from other analysts telling the market that GitLab is not for legacy style deployments, that we're only for cloud native style deployments. And these kinds of fit and finish that you're talking about, Sean, will really help us be competitive against these tools that have been serving this legacy market for 10 years now, right? They're really the laggards, but they've been a leader for so long that it's hard to uproot that culture and thinking that we actually can offer something to the legacy market.
Yeah, and if you have a beautiful, I mean, you know, let's not set the bar too high to start with, but if you have a beautiful dashboard that kind of not only is beautiful, but does all this stuff, I mean, that's almost the only thing you need to show, you know, like you don't need to show people the YAML, right? It's like, okay, that's there, we know it works, right? But, you know, look at this dashboard, you can see everything that's going on. And, you know, just to even think even further ahead, you know, we do have the integration with all the project management tools, right? And that's, you know, this is way down the track, but, you know, maybe there's some way to kind of incorporate a projects view, for example. Yeah, there you go. Think big.
Yeah, I love where your head's at. Well, I know that we only have 1 minute left. Any other questions or thoughts?
I was only thinking about incident correlation with environments. So I know that incident management is coming and you can like feed in alerts from any system. And we could kind of correlate that with environment dashboards, maybe.
Yeah, I did link to that post-deployment monitoring stuff that Orit's doing. I think that will be a first step into integrating incident management into environments, and then we can expand on that iteratively.
That would be awesome.
I'm watching closely.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, for our next Think Big, we'll probably dive into a calendar view of this. I will hopefully have issues created about us being more competitive with Heroku's usability and experience, and then we can start breaking those concepts down. And Hayana, we can revisit our CI/CD lo-fi mocks and kind of think about how do we want to consolidate that lo-fi mock view into the environment's dashboard view, and maybe that becomes like a CI/CD dashboard instead, and that's where we land it all.
Sounds great, Jackie.
Yes.
I can't wait to see the mock-ups.
I know. I have this really crappy Word document that I've been showing to customers, and it's been embarrassing, but it's been, I will be very happy to not be using my little Excel charts.
And I'm looking forward to work in the UI because it'd also be a great asset, a great tool for us to test this with users. So looking forward to this.
Perfect. Well, as always, thank you for your all time, your perspective. We are so thankful to have you all contributing to our vision, and helping make this something great. So thank you, Sean, Michael, Lori, Hyana. Y'all are awesome.
Thanks a lot, JP.